The summer of 2025 is tense for Canada. The air in Ottawa is thick with uncertainty, as government officials and everyday citizens alike watch the world stage with growing concern. The mood across the country is somber, with a sense that something fundamental is shifting in Canada's relationship with its closest allies. President Trump has redrawn the global trade map, striking headline-grabbing deals with Japan and the European Union. These new agreements promise economic growth and closer ties for America and its new partners. But as the ink dries on these deals, Canada finds itself left out in the cold, excluded from the negotiations, and watching from the sidelines as the world's largest economies move forward without it. Ottawa now faces the looming threat of harsh tariffs and an uncertain economic future as the August 1st deadline approaches. The possibility of new trade barriers has sent shockwaves through Canadian industries, from manufacturing to agriculture, and left business leaders scrambling to prepare for the unknown. For decades, Canada and the United States have shared one of the world's most deeply integrated economic partnerships. Millions of jobs on both sides of the border depend on the free flow of goods, services, and people. Cross-border trade has shaped communities, built fortunes, and fostered a sense of shared destiny between the two nations. Now, the threat of high tariffs and new trade barriers is unsettling entire industries. Canadian families worry about their livelihoods as factories slow production, and some even close their doors. In cities across the country, protests erupt as workers and business owners demand action to protect their futures. Canadian leaders are scrambling for an exemption, urgently lobbying Washington and other allies. They argue that the two economies are too intertwined to be adversaries, and that punishing Canada would only hurt both sides. Behind closed doors, negotiations are tense, and the stakes could not be higher. But Trump's America First agenda has upended old loyalties and rewritten the rules of engagement. Canada, once a trusted partner, now waits anxiously for a handshake that may never come. The sense of betrayal is palpable, as officials wonder if decades of friendship and cooperation have been cast aside. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government is under immense pressure, navigating a diplomatic minefield with few easy answers. In Parliament, debates rage over how to respond, while behind the scenes, officials work around the clock to find a breakthrough. Across the nation, Canadians anxiously wonder, what if there's no deal? The stakes are enormous. Canada's economic future, its industries, and the livelihoods of millions hang in the balance. As the deadline draws near, the nation holds its breath, hoping for a resolution that will secure its place in a rapidly changing world. As Canada waits, President Trump secures headline-grabbing deals with Japan and the EU. Japan agrees to massive investments and tariff reductions, funneling billions into American industry. The EU, facing threatened tariffs, settles for a 15% average rate, higher than before, but far less than the 25% Trump threatened. In return, the EU pledges hundreds of billions in U.S. investments and increased purchases of American energy and military goods. Trump's stick-and-carrot approach pays off, rewriting global trade rules and leaving countries like Canada on the outside anxious and isolated. For Trump, these deals are proof his hardball tactics work. For Canada, they signal deepening dread. As Japan and the EU breathe easier, having secured their own trade agreements with the United States, the mood in Ottawa is starkly different. While other allies celebrate breakthroughs and new opportunities, Canada finds itself isolated, watching from the sidelines as doors close one by one. Ottawa faces a cold reality. No deal is coming. The optimism that once filled the halls of Parliament has been replaced by anxiety and uncertainty as leaders grapple with the consequences of being left out in the cold. President Trump, never one to mince words, accuses Canada of arrogance and benefiting unfairly from past trade arrangements. He insists that Canada must make sweeping concessions, dismantling its cherished supply management system, opening up protected markets, and agreeing to much stricter intellectual property rules. These demands are presented as non-negotiable ultimatums, leaving Canadian officials with almost no room to maneuver or seek compromise. The tone is uncompromising, and the stakes could not be higher. The threat from Washington is clear: accept U.S. terms or face punishing tariffs. Among the most severe is a devastating 50% tariff on Canadian steel, a move that would cripple a vital industry and send shockwaves through the economy. And it doesn't stop there. New levies on autos and aluminum loom large, threatening thousands of jobs and putting entire communities at risk. The pressure is relentless, and the consequences are potentially catastrophic. Canadian negotiators are trapped in an impossible position: defend national interests and risk economic disaster, or capitulate to U.S. demands and face political backlash at home. Every option seems fraught with peril. For many Canadians, the U.S. stance feels like a deep betrayal, turning what was once a trusted partnership into a very public feud. The sense of camaraderie and shared purpose has been replaced by suspicion and resentment. As the deadline for negotiations draws near, hope for a friendly settlement fades. In its place is a grim acceptance that a major economic storm may be unavoidable, and that the fallout could last for years. The relationship between Canada and the United States has never felt more fragile, with the future of North American trade hanging in the balance. With Washington unyielding, Prime Minister Carney takes a stand. In a televised address, he announces Canada is preparing for life without a U.S. trade deal, refusing to sacrifice core interests or sovereignty. Diplomatically, Carney appeals to American lawmakers and business leaders, warning a trade war would hurt both nations. At home, his government moves to shield key industries, especially steel, from the fallout of U.S. tariffs. Canada blocks cheap foreign steel to protect its market, signaling it won't be bullied. This firm posture is risky. It could antagonize Trump further, but Carney insists Canada must defend itself, deal or no deal. It's a pivotal moment. Canada draws a line, ready to chart its own course. Canada's steel blockade isn't aggression, it's self-defense. Trump's 50% steel tariff shuts global producers out of the U.S., creating a glut of cheap steel looking for a new home. Without action, Canada would be flooded, threatening its domestic industry and thousands of jobs. The government's safeguard measures block steel from likely sources, preserving a level playing field for Canadian companies. It's a temporary but vital move, widely supported by unions and industry to prevent economic collapse. Ironically, Canada adopts protectionism to defend itself from American protectionism. The message: Canada will do what it takes to protect its own. In Hamilton, Ontario, steel town, the trade crisis is personal. Workers fear for their jobs and futures, feeling betrayed by a partner they've supplied for generations. Local businesses brace for downturns as uncertainty ripples through the community. When the mills hurt, everyone hurts, says a restaurant owner. The anxiety is palpable. In Windsor, auto workers worry tariffs could shut down plants, disrupting supply chains that cross the border daily. Trucking companies already see American clients hesitating, slowing business even before tariffs hit. Across Canada, families fear for pensions, savings, and stability. For them, this isn't politics. It's about mortgages, education, and survival. The lack of a U.S. deal casts a long shadow, replacing stability with deep uncertainty. The human cost of the standoff is real and growing. Economists warn the damage from a U.S. trade war could be severe. The uncertainty alone chills investment and hiring as businesses hold back in a volatile environment. A 50% steel tariff and 25% auto tariff would hit Canada's GDP hard, with the auto sector especially vulnerable. The pain would be felt more in Canada than the U.S., given the economic imbalance. Even a last-minute deal would likely mean painful concessions and a new era of managed restricted trade. The loonie drops, imports get pricier, and investors see Canada as riskier. Trump's policies force a fundamental reassessment of Canada's economic future. The era of easy access to the U.S. market is over. Canada must adapt fast. Across Canada, the trade standoff dominates daily life. There's frustration at being targeted by a friend, pride in standing firm, and deep worry about the future. Polls show strong support for Carney's tough stance, with a sense of unity emerging. But fears about jobs, rising costs, and lost opportunities are real. Families struggle to plan for the future as economic stability feels fragile. The crisis sparks a national conversation. Can Canada rely on one trading partner? Many now call for aggressive diversification and new global ties. This moment could be a turning point, forcing Canada to become more resilient and self-reliant. As the August 1st deadline looms, Canada faces some of the most difficult choices in its recent history. The stakes are high, and the pressure is mounting on leaders, businesses, and everyday Canadians alike. With every passing day, uncertainty grows, and the nation holds its breath, wondering what the future will bring. A last-minute deal remains possible, but it would come at a steep price. Any agreement reached now would likely require painful concessions from Canada, sacrifices that could impact key industries, jobs, and the country's economic sovereignty. Negotiators are working around the clock, but the atmosphere is tense and trust is in short supply. If talks collapse, harsh U.S. tariffs could take effect almost immediately. The consequences would be severe: job losses across manufacturing and resource sectors, business closures in communities large and small, and the looming threat of a recession. In response, Canada would be forced to retaliate, introducing its own tariffs and scrambling to support affected workers and industries. A prolonged stalemate could mean that high tariffs and trade barriers become the new normal. This would push Canada to rapidly diversify its economy, seeking new partners and markets beyond its southern neighbor. The country would need to adapt quickly, rethinking its economic strategy for a more uncertain world. To survive and thrive, Canada would have to invest in new infrastructure, negotiate fresh trade deals with Europe, Asia, and beyond, and shift away from its traditional dependence on the U.S. This transition would not be easy, but it could open up new opportunities for growth and innovation. Whatever the outcome, this crisis has shattered old assumptions and exposed just how vulnerable Canada can be in a rapidly changing global landscape. The sense of security that once existed has been replaced by anxiety and a pressing need for resilience. In the immediate future, the focus will be on damage control, helping businesses and families weather the storm. But the long-term challenge is even greater: building a stronger, more independent economy that can withstand future shocks and seize new opportunities. Today, Canada stands at a crossroads, forced to rethink its place in the world and the path it wants to take. The decisions made now will shape the nation's destiny for years to come. Across the country, the nation is watching, waiting, and preparing for whatever comes next, hoping for the best, but ready to face the challenges ahead with determination and unity.